Now, usually at this point in the discussion, not only the DBAs, but the architects have broken out in a cold sweat saying, Mongo sounds like it's chaos. Are you telling me I can throw anything in this schemaless data store? I can throw fields at it willy-nilly. There's no guarantee that things will be consistent? Well, of course not. Of course not. And this is where Mongoose comes to the party. Now, Mongoose is a library for MongoDB, and certainly you can use Mongo without Mongoose. I'll try to pronounce these very clearly. MongooseJS is not an ORM. It's not an object relational mapper. You can see from MongoosJS.com that we say Mongoose is a MongoDB object modeling library. So really what Mongoose brings to the party is it brings some of that consistency that you worried you were about to lose. It brings additional hooks to the party as well. It brings things like validation and default data types and eventing, pre and post save hooks, all kinds of good things. So you certainly can use MongoDB without Mongoose, but I find it's an invaluable addition to the technology stack. So the way we get Mongoose installed in our application is the way we get anything else installed. We say npm install mongoose --save, of course, making sure that we not only get the bits in the node modules directory, but we also update our package.json file with a runtime dependency. Once we have npm installed, you can see we can require in Mongoose, and then we can use Mongoose to connect up to our database. Now, there are native Mongo drivers as well. You can npm install Mongo, or you can npm install Mongoose, and in fact, Mongoose has a declarative dependency, a transitive dependency on the Mongo drivers under the covers. But if you require in Mongoose, you get the Mongo drivers for free. Now, once you're using Mongoose, one of the first things you're going to do is you're going to define a new schema. So if we have something like a blog post, we might decide that a blog post is going to have an author and a title and a body and a publication date and all kinds of things like that. Already we begin seeing something that's looking a little bit more class-like. But if you go from the simple to the more realistic, we begin seeing something that looks like this. A comment is of type string and it has a default value. Maybe not the best default value, but a default value nonetheless. A number can have a minimum value, a maximum value, and it looks like we're going to be writing a lot of queries on age, so we are going to index it right here from the class definition. Bio is a string, and we've put some validation in there. It's going to match that regex. Of course, you've heard the story about the programmer who thought she had a problem she could solve with regex, and then she had two problems. Yeah. But at any rate, this is how we do validation. We have dates that have a default of now. You begin seeing that this is a more robust way to model information in Mongoose and MongoDB. We even see things like our pre-save hooks down there. So as we're going to save this, we have the ability to update some files, to do things like make things uppercase or lowercase, or trim off the seconds on the time field, or whatever we need to do. We have both pre and post-save hooks where we can do the manipulation we need before it hits the database. Now, one thing that's very interesting about MongoDB is that it doesn't support stored procedures or any kind of logic at all. It's really meant to be a durable JSON store. So all of this business logic, setting defaults and validating and things, ends up in our application. And that's okay as well, because just like we do our web server configuration in our application, we also do our data validation and manipulation in our application as well. Now, just like Mongo supports subdocuments and arrays of subdocuments, we can model that in Mongoose as well. So now all of a sudden our blog entry looks like we have an array of comments, and that makes sense. And this is an array of anonymous comment objects in here, just anonymous JSON objects that have a body and a date. We can even define this as an external schema and link things this way. But we can see that the date field is in fact a date field, a simple scalar value, but comments are an array of values, and meta later on is just another embedded subdocument from there. So Mongoose allows us to represent all the things that you would want to persist in Mongo. It even manages one-to-many relationships. So let's suppose that we have a toy that has a name associated with it, and then we have a toy box. Well, one toy box can hold many toys, and so we can see that our toys field, in fact, is an array of toy types. So we are able to manage these one-to-many relationships very nicely, and once you have a one-to-many relationship defined, even though Mongo doesn't support joins, Mongoose gives us a magic populate method. And populate method, even though behind the scenes it's really doing n queries to build these things up, one for the toy box and then one more query to pull all the toys out, we can turn around and programmatically at least make it look like a single transaction. Make it look like that when I get the toy box, I don't want to have just an array of primary keys. I'd like you to go in and populate all the toys as well. And this populate function is very powerful because you can go from having just a primary key to a fully rehydrated object to a sparsely populated object as well. When I'm populating it, I can also give it just a list of fields that I want to be included. So perhaps in my toy box, I just want to include the ID and the name because that's what's going to be displayed. But the manufacturer and the price and the warranty date and all that, we'll leave that behind for when we request the toy itself. So even though I might have worried you when I said that Mongo doesn't support one-to-many relationships, now that we're back in Mongoose, hopefully you feel much more comfortable about this and actually find that we have a nice, robust way of dealing with one-to-many relationships thanks to Mongoose, our object modeling library. So the idea behind all this, and you've seen now example after example after example out of this, is we favor highly cohesive libraries that do one thing and one thing very, very well. Mongoose does one thing and one thing very, very well, and it models our JSON objects that we're going to persist in MongoDB, but it brings a lot of functionality that we would lose if we were just having a raw Mongo driver. We have the ability to declare defaults and validation and define entire subdocuments, an array of subdocs, and when you're in a one-to-many situation, we have methods like populate that allow us to bring these joins back that you thought you were going to miss by choosing a document database like MongoDB.